Have you ever found yourself in a room full of people, carefully monitoring every word before you speak? Have you laughed at jokes that weren't funny, nodded in agreement with opinions you didn't share, or kept quiet about your passions because you were afraid of what others might think? If so, you're not alone. This experience is so common that it touches nearly every person at some point in their lives, yet it remains one of the most psychologically significant struggles we face in modern society. The human experience is paradoxical in many ways, but perhaps none more so than this. We are creatures wired for connection, yet we often hide the very parts of ourselves that could create the deepest connections. We wear masks so sophisticated that sometimes we forget what lies beneath them. We curate versions of ourselves for different audiences: a professional self for the workplace, a family self for our relatives, a social self for our friends, and sometimes, if we're lucky, an authentic self that we show to no one at all. This fragmentation of identity isn't a character flaw or a sign of weakness. Rather, it's a complex psychological response to the environment we've been shaped by since childhood. Understanding why people are afraid to be themselves requires us to venture into the intricate landscape of human psychology. It's a landscape populated by childhood memories we may not consciously recall, family dynamics that shaped our nervous systems, social conditioning that ran so deep we couldn't see it, and traumatic experiences that taught us that vulnerability was dangerous. The fear of being ourselves isn't something we're born with. It's something we learn, and because we learned it, we can unlearn it. But first, we need to understand where this fear comes from. The mask we wear serves a purpose. Psychologically speaking, this adaptive mechanism developed because at some point in our lives, being ourselves wasn't safe. Maybe it wasn't physically safe, but more often, it wasn't emotionally safe. A child who expressed anger might have been punished. A teenager who shared their dreams might have been mocked. An adult who showed vulnerability might have been exploited or rejected. Over time, these experiences consolidate into a core belief. The real me is too much, too different, too weird, too sensitive, too ambitious, or simply not good enough. So we hide. We perform. We become what we think others want us to be. This script explores the psychological foundations of self-suppression, the why behind the mask. We'll examine how fear of judgment becomes embedded in our psyche, how childhood experiences wire our nervous systems to prioritize safety over authenticity, how shame becomes fused with our identity, and how trauma teaches us that our true selves are dangerous. We'll look at the profiles of people pleasers and those who practice emotional repression, understanding not as a judgment, but with compassion for what they've survived. We'll explore how social dynamics and group conformity pressures keep the mask firmly in place, and we'll examine the profound costs of living inauthentically. Most importantly, we'll discuss what happens when we begin to understand these patterns, because understanding is the first step toward change. The journey toward authenticity isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been beneath the protective layers. It's about recognizing that the parts of yourself you've hidden aren't flawed, they're human. And it's about slowly, carefully, learning that maybe, just maybe, the world is safer now than it was when you first learned to hide. Self-suppression, at its core, is a survival mechanism. To understand this, we need to recognize that human beings are fundamentally social creatures. Our brains evolved in small groups where social rejection could literally mean death. Being exiled from the tribe meant starvation, vulnerability to predators, and isolation. Because of this evolutionary history, we have extraordinarily sensitive social detection systems. Our brains are constantly scanning the environment for signs of acceptance or rejection, safety or threat. When we perceive that our authentic selves might trigger rejection, our nervous system responds with the same urgency it would to a physical threat. Psychologist Carl Rogers introduced a concept he called conditional positive regard. This is the idea that we receive love and approval only when we meet certain conditions set by others. When a child grows up receiving love only when they're quiet, obedient, successful, or compliant, they internalize the message that their natural self, their spontaneity, their authentic desires, their genuine emotions, is unlovable. They learn that love is transactional. In response, they develop what Rogers called their ideal self, a version of themselves they believe is worthy of love. But here's the psychological cost. The wider the gap between the real self and the ideal self, the greater the psychological distress. This gap creates what psychologists call incongruence. When we're living inauthentically, our real experiences don't match the image we're projecting. This produces a constant state of cognitive dissonance. Our mind knows we're pretending, even if we're not consciously aware of it. Our body certainly knows. The nervous system registers the inauthenticity as a form of threat, and over time, this chronic low-level stress can contribute to anxiety, depression, and various physical health problems. People who consistently suppress their true selves often report feeling empty, disconnected, or as though they're watching their own lives from the outside rather than participating in them. This is a form of dissociation, a psychological defense mechanism where we mentally separate from our experiences as a way to cope with overwhelming stress. The suppression of the self doesn't happen consciously for most people. We don't wake up one day and decide to hide our authentic selves. Instead, it happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, through accumulated experiences that teach us that certain parts of us aren't safe to express. A child's natural curiosity gets shut down when they ask too many questions and are told to be quiet. Their spontaneity gets disciplined when their joy is seen as inappropriate. Their vulnerability gets punished when tears are met with criticism rather than comfort. Their ambition gets questioned when their dreams are deemed unrealistic. Over time, these experiences consolidate into a protective pattern. Keep yourself small, keep yourself quiet, keep yourself controlled. Psychologist Harriet Lerner describes this as shame-based socialization. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt is about something we did wrong. Shame is about something being wrong with us. When we're frequently shamed during childhood and adolescence, we develop a core belief that there's something fundamentally flawed about our essence. This shame becomes attached to specific aspects of our identity or our natural expressions. A child who is repeatedly told they're too sensitive develops shame around their emotional nature. A child who is told they're too loud develops shame around their self-expression. A child who is told they're not smart enough develops shame around their intelligence. And so, To escape the pain of shame, they suppress these aspects of themselves. The psychology of self-suppression also involves what's known as self-monitoring, the tendency to regulate our behavior based on social cues. Some degree of self-monitoring is healthy and adaptive. It allows us to behave appropriately in different contexts. But high self-monitors, people who are extremely attuned to social cues and constantly adjusting their behavior, often experience higher levels of anxiety and lower levels of authenticity. They're so focused on how they're being perceived that they lose touch with what they actually think and feel. Research in social psychology has shown that high self-monitors often feel less satisfied with their relationships. Because even though they may have many connections, these connections are typically based on the false self rather than the authentic self. Fear of judgment is perhaps the most direct cause of self-suppression in adults. This fear isn't irrational or unfounded. Judgment does exist, and it can be harsh. But the intensity of fear that some people experience around judgment is often disproportionate to the actual threat. This disproportionate fear typically has roots in past experiences where judgment did result in real consequences: rejection, ridicule, punishment, or loss of relationship. In social psychology, there's a phenomenon called the spotlight effect, which describes our tendency to overestimate how much other people notice and judge our appearance, behavior, and mistakes. We feel like we're constantly in the spotlight, being scrutinized and evaluated. The reality is that most people are too focused on their own insecurities and concerns to pay as much attention to us as we think. Yet the fear of judgment persists because it's rooted not just in rational thought, but in emotional memory. Our brains have encoded experiences where we were indeed judged negatively, and those memories continue to trigger our threat response. Social anxiety disorder, which affects millions of people, is fundamentally rooted in fear of judgment. People with social anxiety don't necessarily fear social situations themselves. They fear the negative judgments they believe others will make about them. They might fear being judged as boring, stupid, awkward, weird, anxious, or uninteresting. This fear is so strong that it triggers a cascade of physical symptoms: racing heart, difficulty breathing, trembling, sweating, and intense discomfort. In response to these symptoms, people with social anxiety often avoid social situations altogether, which reinforces the anxiety by preventing them from having corrective experiences that might challenge their negative beliefs. The fear of judgment is also connected to what psychologists call audience anxiety, the anxiety that arises when we believe we're being evaluated by others. Interestingly, research has shown that audience anxiety is reduced when people feel they have some control over the evaluation, or when they believe the audience is on their side. This could imply that part of what makes judgment so frightening is the sense of powerlessness it creates. When we're suppressing our authentic selves to avoid judgment, we're essentially giving other people control over how we present ourselves. We're allowing their perceived opinions to dictate our behavior. This loss of agency itself becomes a source of anxiety. There's also a phenomenon in social psychology called reputation management, which refers to the strategies we use to control how others perceive us. Some reputation management strategies are healthy: being professional at work, being respectful of others' boundaries, being kind. But when reputation management becomes the primary driver of our behavior, we're no longer making choices based on our values or preferences. We're making choices based on what we think will generate the best impression. Over time, this exhausting performance can lead to what researchers call social fatigue, a profound tiredness that comes not from physical exertion, but from the mental effort of constantly monitoring and adjusting our self-presentation. People who are deeply afraid of judgment often develop what's called rejection sensitivity. This is an extreme emotional reactivity to perceived rejection. Someone with rejection sensitivity might interpret a friend being busy as a personal rejection, or a partner being quiet as a sign that they're no longer loved. They may catastrophize minor social interactions, convinced that they've done something wrong, or that others now think poorly of them. This hypervigilance to rejection is exhausting, and it often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The anxious, overly apologetic, or self-deprecating behavior that results from rejection sensitivity can actually repel people, creating the very rejection they feared. Perhaps the most powerful influence on whether we feel safe being ourselves is our childhood family environment. Family systems theory, developed by Murray Bowen, suggests that families operate as emotional systems where patterns of relating get passed down across generations. In some families, emotional expression is welcomed and validated. In others, emotions are seen as weakness or inconvenience. In still others, certain emotions are acceptable, while others are completely taboo. Children are exquisitely sensitive to the emotional climate of their families. They pick up on subtle cues about what's acceptable and what's dangerous. A child who grows up in a family where emotions aren't discussed learns to suppress their emotions. A child whose parent uses shame as a disciplinary tool learns that being vulnerable leads to humiliation. A child whose parent dismisses their feelings, saying things like, "You're being too sensitive," or "That's not a big deal," learns that their emotional experience is invalid. These lessons become deeply embedded in the child's nervous system and sense of self. Attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby and expanded by Mary Ainsworth, describes the different ways children learn to relate to others based on their early experiences with caregivers. Children with secure attachment, whose caregivers were consistently responsive, emotionally available, and validating, develop the confidence that their needs matter and that it's safe to express themselves authentically. Children with anxious attachment, whose caregivers were inconsistently available or overly focused on the caregiver's own emotional needs, learn to suppress their own needs and focus on managing the caregiver's emotional state. Children with avoidant attachment, whose caregivers were emotionally distant or dismissive, learn that expressing their feelings leads to rejection, so they suppress their emotional needs and become self-reliant to a fault. It's crucial to understand that none of this is about blame. Most parents do the best they can with the resources and understanding they have. But the reality is that many parents were themselves raised in environments where authenticity wasn't safe, so they inadvertently passed down that legacy of suppression to their children. A parent who was shamed for being emotional will likely struggle to validate their child's emotions. A parent who learned that their needs were always secondary might struggle to set appropriate boundaries, or might unconsciously teach their child that self-sacrifice is love. These patterns emotions, while understandable, create environments where children learn that their authentic selves are burdensome or unworthy. Family roles also play a significant part in conditioning self-suppression. In many families, children are unconsciously assigned roles: the responsible one, the troublemaker, the peacemaker, the invisible one. These roles can provide a sense of identity and function within the family system, but they also limit authentic self-expression. The responsible one might never allow themselves to be playful or irresponsible. The troublemaker might never be able to succeed without being seen as fake. The peacemaker might suppress their own needs to keep the family calm. The invisible one might believe that their presence itself is a burden. These roles, while they might have served a protective function in childhood, often persist into adulthood, limiting the person's ability to be their full, complex self. Another aspect of childhood conditioning involves what psychologists call conditional love. When children receive love only when they achieve certain things: good grades, athletic success, beauty, compliance, they learn that their inherent worth is contingent on performance. They learn that there are parts of themselves that are only lovable if they're hidden or transformed. A child might learn that their introversion is unacceptable and must be hidden behind extroverted performance. They might learn that their creativity threatens their parents' ego and must be suppressed. They might learn that their gender expression isn't approved of and must be carefully controlled. All of these conditional love scenarios teach children that authenticity is dangerous and that suppression is necessary for survival. Family communication patterns also deeply influence whether we feel safe being ourselves. In families where open, honest communication is modeled and encouraged, children learn that it's safe to speak their minds and express their feelings. In families where communication is indirect, where problems are avoided, where emotions are discussed in hushed tones, or not at all, children learn that certain topics are dangerous, certain feelings are unacceptable, and certain truths must be hidden. Some families even actively discourage children from talking about what they think or feel, using phrases like, "Don't talk back." Children are meant to be seen and not heard, or "Nobody cares what you think." Under these conditions, it makes perfect sense that a child would learn to suppress their authentic self. Shame is one of the most powerful and least understood human emotions. While guilt motivates us to change our behavior because we've done something wrong, shame motivates us to hide or change ourselves because we believe something is fundamentally wrong with us. And when shame becomes attached to our core identity, to who we are as a person, it becomes a potent force driving self-suppression. Core beliefs are the deep assumptions we hold about ourselves, others, and the world. They're usually formed early in life and operate beneath our conscious awareness, but they profoundly influence how we interpret events and how we behave. A person with the core belief of "I am unworthy" will interpret neutral events through that lens. If someone doesn't respond to their message, they won't think they're probably busy. They'll think they don't care about me. If they say something in a group and nobody responds, they won't think maybe they didn't hear me. They'll think what I said was stupid. These core beliefs act like filters, distorting reality to confirm what we already believe about ourselves. Shame-based core beliefs are particularly powerful drivers of self-suppression. When someone has internalized the belief that there's something fundamentally wrong or defective about them, they engage in what's called shame-based identity. This means their sense of self is built around the belief in their own defectiveness. They might suppress their opinions because they believe their thoughts are foolish. They might suppress their emotions because they believe their feelings are overreactions or burdens. They might suppress their desires because they believe what they want is selfish or wrong. They might suppress their appearance because they believe they're ugly or unacceptable. In each case, the suppression is driven by shame about that particular aspect of their identity. Different types of shame lead to different patterns of suppression. A person might feel shame about being introverted in an extroverted family, shame about their sexuality, shame about their gender identity or gender expression, shame about their body, shame about their intelligence, shame about their family background, shame about their economic status, shame about their mental health, or shame about any number of aspects of their identity. The specific content matters less than the underlying dynamic. They believe something about themselves is wrong or unacceptable, so they hide it. And the more central that aspect is to their identity, the more fundamental the suppression becomes. What's particularly insidious about shame-based identity is that it becomes self-perpetuating. When we suppress aspects of ourselves, we don't get the opportunity to have experiences that might disconfirm our negative beliefs. We don't get to find out that people might actually accept or even appreciate the parts we're hiding. We remain isolated with our shame, convinced that everyone else is more normal, more acceptable, more worthy. This could imply that one of the most important steps in overcoming shame-based self-suppression is deliberately putting ourselves in situations where we risk being seen. Because only through being seen and accepted can we begin to challenge the core beliefs that keep us hidden. Shame also has what researchers call internalized stigma. This occurs when we internalize the negative stereotypes or stigma that society places on people like us. A person from a marginalized group might internalize society's negative beliefs about their group and apply those beliefs to themselves. A person with a mental health condition might internalize the stigma surrounding that condition and believe they're defective because of it. A person whose family background is considered lower class might internalize classist stigma and feel ashamed of where they come from. This internalized stigma becomes a part of their identity, and they suppress aspects of themselves to distance themselves from the stigmatized group. The relationship between shame and perfectionism is also worth exploring. Many people who struggle with self-suppression are simultaneously driven by perfectionism. This might seem contradictory. If you're suppressing yourself, how can you be a perfectionist? But it actually makes psychological sense. Perfectionism is often a response to shame. If I'm not good enough, then I need to be perfect to be acceptable. If I'm defective, then I need to hide all evidence of my defectiveness and present only my best self. Perfectionism and self-suppression are both attempts to control how others perceive us and to avoid the shame of being seen as inadequate. This combination, perfectionism plus suppression, is particularly exhausting because it leaves no room for being human, for making mistakes, for being imperfect, for simply existing without achieving or proving something. People-pleasing is a specific manifestation of self-suppression where someone prioritizes other people's needs, feelings, and preferences above their own. People-pleasers are often seen as exceptionally kind, considerate, and generous. But what's actually happening is a complex psychological pattern rooted in fear and learned helplessness around their own needs. Most people-pleasers develop this pattern in childhood, when their own needs were either ignored, seen as burdensome, or made conditional on meeting the needs of others first. A child whose parent was depressed might have learned that their role was to manage their parents' emotions and not add to their burden. A child with a sibling who had significant needs might have learned to be invisible to avoid taking resources away. A child whose parent was volatile might have learned to constantly monitor that parent's mood and adjust their own behavior to keep them calm. In each case, the child learned that their needs don't matter as much as other people's needs, and that their value comes from what they do for others, rather than from simply existing. There's a neurobiological component to people-pleasing as well. The nervous system of a person who grew up in an unpredictable or threatening environment becomes hypervigilant to social cues. They develop an exaggerated startle response to other people's emotions. When someone else is angry or upset, their nervous system responds as though they themselves are in danger. In response, they automatically move to soothe that person's distress. Over time, this becomes automatic. They don't consciously decide to put others' needs first. Their nervous system has been wired to prioritize other people's emotional safety. People-pleasers often report feeling resentful, even though they're the ones choosing to prioritize other people's needs. This resentment arises because they're constantly suppressing their own needs, desires, and opinions. Over time, this creates a pressure cooker effect. They're not expressing what they truly want. They're not setting boundaries around what they're willing to do, and they're not communicating their true feelings. So they end up feeling taken advantage of, exhausted and angry, even though others may not have explicitly demanded this behavior. The resentment ultimately gets directed either inward, leading to depression and anxiety, or outward, where it can damage relationships through passive-aggressive behavior or sudden explosions. People-pleasers typically have what's called an external locus of control. They believe that other people are responsible for their happiness, and that their job is to manage other people in order to maintain relationships. This is exhausting and ultimately futile because, despite their efforts, they can't actually control whether other people stay in relationships with them or treat them well. They're trying to buy acceptance and love through good behavior, but this creates a fundamental problem. They're never sure if they're loved for who they are or for what they do. This uncertainty keeps the anxiety and suppression going. Trauma is one of the most powerful forces driving self-suppression and emotional repression. When a person experiences trauma, whether it's abuse, violence, loss, violation, or other severe stressors, their nervous system learns that being open, vulnerable, or expressive is dangerous. Their brain essentially categorizes authenticity as a threat and suppression as a survival mechanism. There are different types of trauma that can lead to self-suppression. Physical abuse teaches a person that their body is not safe and that it's dangerous to be noticed or to take up space. Emotional abuse teaches that their feelings are wrong or burdensome. Verbal abuse teaches that their thoughts and voice don't matter. Neglect teaches that their needs won't be met, so it's pointless to express them. Sexual abuse teaches that their body and their sexuality are sources of danger. Loss and grief teach that attachment is painful. Betrayal teaches that trust is foolish. All of these different forms of trauma have one thing in common. They teach that authenticity is costly and suppression is necessary for survival. The neurobiology of trauma helps explain why this suppression can persist long after the dangerous situation has ended. When trauma occurs, the brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, becomes hypersensitive. The person develops what's called hyperarousal, where their nervous system remains in a state of high alert, constantly scanning for danger. Because the trauma taught them that being visible and authentic led to harm, their brain associates authenticity with danger. Even years later, in a completely safe environment, the thought of being authentic can trigger the same fear response that was necessary during the actual trauma. Emotional repression is a specific defense mechanism that often develops in response to trauma. When feeling emotions feels too dangerous or overwhelming, the mind essentially shuts down the ability to feel them. This is an unconscious process. The person isn't consciously deciding not to feel. Their nervous system is making that decision for them. They might describe feeling numb, disconnected, or like they're watching their life from outside their body. This dissociation and emotional repression can help people survive overwhelming circumstances, but they also mean that the person is no longer in touch with their authentic self. They don't know what they feel because they've become disconnected from their feelings. Complex trauma, which is trauma that occurs repeatedly over an extended period, often in childhood, creates particularly deep patterns of self-suppression. Children who grow up in chronically traumatic environments, such as homes with ongoing abuse, addiction, mental illness, or violence, don't have the opportunity to develop a stable sense of self. Instead, they develop multiple strategies for staying safe and out of the way. They might become hypervigilant, always watching for signs of danger. They might become invisible, taking up as little space as possible. They might become compliant, doing whatever is asked to avoid triggering harm. They might become parentified, taking care of their caregiver's emotional needs instead of having their own needs met. Over time, these survival strategies become so embedded in their identity that they might not even remember what their authentic self looks like. The connection between trauma and perfectionism is particularly strong. Trauma survivors often become perfectionists as a way of trying to maintain control and prevent future harm. If I can be perfect, then I can prevent bad things from happening. If I can anticipate every need and meet it flawlessly, then I can't be blindsided or hurt. This perfectionism serves a protective function. It makes the person feel like they have some control in a world that proved itself to be uncontrollable. But it also perpetuates self-suppression because true perfection is impossible, which means the trauma survivor must continually suppress any evidence of human imperfection. it's also important to recognize that trauma can be transmitted across generations. Children who grow up with parents who have unprocessed trauma often inherit their parents' defensive patterns. A parent who learned to suppress their emotions as a survival mechanism might teach their children to suppress theirs as well, without either parent and child being fully conscious of why. A parent who had to be hypervigilant might unconsciously teach their child hypervigilance. This intergenerational transmission of trauma-based self-suppression can create patterns that have been running for generations before anyone even understands what's happening or why. One of the most important concepts in understanding self-suppression is the idea of the inner child. This is a concept from internal family systems therapy and other trauma-informed approaches. The inner child represents the vulnerable, authentic parts of ourselves that are still carrying the wounds from childhood. It's the part of us that feels our feelings authentically, that knows what we genuinely want, that instinctively moves toward joy and away from pain. And in many people who have learned to suppress themselves, the inner child has been essentially abandoned. Self-abandonment occurs when we leave the inner child's needs, feelings, and perspectives unmet in favor of meeting the demands of the external world or the critical voices in our head. Every time we suppress what we genuinely feel to make someone else comfortable, we're abandoning the inner child. Every time we go against our own values to please someone else, we're abandoning the inner child. Every time we criticize ourselves for being too much, too sensitive, too ambitious, or too different, we're abandoning the inner child. We're siding with the critical voices that told us these things were wrong. Over time, repeated self-abandonment creates a profound internal fracture. The person has essentially disowned the parts of themselves that they decided were unacceptable. This abandonment of the inner child mirrors the abandonment they experienced from their external caregivers. If a child's emotional needs weren't met, the child learned that emotions are unsafe and should be abandoned. If a child's authentic self wasn't welcomed, the child learned to abandon that authentic self. Now, as an adult, that person abandons themselves in the same way they were abandoned. They become their own critical parent, their own neglectful caregiver, their own perpetrator. And when we abandon ourselves, we inevitably end up feeling anxious, depressed, disconnected, and unfulfilled, even if externally everything looks fine. The reclamation of the inner child is an essential part of healing from self-suppression. This doesn't mean becoming childish or regressing into childhood. It means reconnecting with the authentic, vulnerable parts of ourselves that we had to hide to survive. It means getting curious about what the inner child wants, what it feels, what it needs. It means beginning to take those wants, feelings, and needs seriously, rather than automatically suppressing them. It means sometimes letting ourselves feel our feelings fully instead of stuffing them down. It means asking ourselves what we actually want instead of just assuming we know what we're supposed to want. For many people, reconnecting with the inner child is scary because the inner child was the part that got hurt. The inner child's authentic expression led to rejection, criticism, or worse. So there's a part of us that wants to keep the inner child locked away for protection. But this protection comes at a cost. We can't be fully alive, fully present, or fully ourselves while we're keeping our inner child imprisoned. We remain partially numb, partially disconnected, partially performing. The relationship we have with our inner child is fundamentally about compassion and safety. When we learn to be compassionate toward the inner child, to listen to it, to take it seriously, to validate its feelings, we begin to restore the safety that was missing in childhood. We become the nurturing caregiver we needed. And when the inner child feels safe and heard, it doesn't have to protect us through such extreme suppression anymore. It can relax. And when the inner child relaxes, we can begin to access our authentic self more freely. There's also a concept called reparenting, which involves consciously providing yourself with what you didn't receive from your parents. This might mean comforting yourself when you're distressed instead of pushing the feelings away. It might mean setting boundaries on your own behalf instead of always accommodating others. It might mean celebrating your accomplishments instead of immediately moving on to the next achievement. It might mean accepting yourself as you are instead of constantly criticizing yourself. Reparenting is an active, intentional process of giving yourself what you should have received from the beginning. Beyond individual psychology, there are powerful social forces that drive self-suppression. Humans have an innate need to belong, and we're exquisitely attuned to the norms and expectations of our groups. From an evolutionary perspective, this made sense. Belonging to a group was necessary for survival. But in modern society, this need to conform can drive us to suppress our authentic selves in order to fit in. Conformity research, famously studied by Solomon Asch in the 1950s, demonstrates just how powerful the pressure to conform is. In Asch's experiments, participants were shown lines and asked which comparison line matched the original. The task was incredibly simple. So simple that people got it right almost 100% of the time when they answered alone. But when the participant was in a group where others gave the wrong answer, many participants conformed to the group answer, even though they could clearly see it was wrong. Some participants even began to doubt their own perception. This tendency toward conformity is deeply embedded in human psychology. The concept of social identity helps explain why we suppress ourselves to conform. According to social identity theory, a significant part of our self-esteem comes from the groups we belong to. We want our groups to be positively evaluated, and we want to be seen as good members of those groups. This can mean conforming to group norms, even when those norms contradict our authentic selves. A person might suppress their genuine interests because they're not cool within their peer group. A person might hide their political beliefs because they don't match the beliefs of their family or community. A person might suppress their gender expression or sexual orientation because those aren't accepted in their particular social context. The stakes of nonconformity vary depending on the group and the context. In some groups and contexts, being authentic and different is celebrated or at least tolerated. In others, it can result in social ostracism, which is experienced by the brain as physical pain. Studies using brain imaging show that social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. This is why being left out of a group or criticized by peers hurts so intensely. Given this biological reality, it makes sense that people would suppress their authentic selves to avoid social rejection. Different groups have different levels of tolerance for authenticity and difference. Some families pride themselves on accepting each member's uniqueness. Others have strict rules about how to be. Some friend groups celebrate individuality. Others enforce conformity through subtle social pressure and mockery. Some workplaces encourage authentic self-expression. Others demand a carefully curated professional persona. Some religious or cultural communities welcome questioning and evolution. Others consider deviation from tradition to be threatening. The more rigid and intolerant a person's primary groups are, the more they'll feel pressure to suppress their authentic self. There's also something called pluralistic ignorance, which occurs when everyone in a group is secretly unhappy with the group's norms, but believes they're the only one who feels that way. So everyone conforms publicly while secretly wishing things were different. This can imply that in many groups there are people who are suppressing themselves based on a misunderstanding of what the group actually wants. They believe everyone else genuinely agrees with the group norms, not realizing that others are also secretly suppressing themselves. If even one person had the courage to be authentic, others might follow, and the whole group dynamic could shift. Social media has intensified many of these conformity pressures. We now have the ability to present a carefully curated version of ourselves to a massive audience, which incentivizes suppression and inauthenticity. The metrics, likes, comments, shares, reward content that conforms to what the algorithm thinks people want to see, which is often not the most authentic content, but the content most likely to provoke engagement. We end up suppressing our genuine selves in favor of a version of ourselves we think will be more liked, more followed, more validated by strangers on the internet. This can create a feedback loop where our sense of identity becomes increasingly based on external validation rather than internal authenticity. Living inauthentically exacts a significant psychological and physical toll. While self-suppression might feel necessary or even protective in the moment, over time, it becomes a source of suffering rather than a solution to suffering. One of the primary costs is anxiety. When we're constantly monitoring how we're being perceived, constantly adjusting our behavior to meet others' expectations, constantly worried about being discovered or exposed as different than we appear, we exist in a state of chronic anxiety. Our nervous system remains activated, ready to detect threat and respond with suppression. This persistent anxiety can develop into an anxiety disorder if it goes on long enough. Many people with anxiety disorders don't realize that their anxiety is at least partially rooted in the inauthenticity of their self-presentation. They're anxious because they're living a lie, not because the external circumstances warrant that level of anxiety. Depression is another common consequence of chronic self-suppression. Depression often arises when we've given up on expressing our authentic selves. There's research suggesting that depression involves a loss of agency, a sense that our actions don't matter or can't change things. When we're suppressing ourselves to meet others' expectations, we've essentially surrendered our agency. We're not making choices based on what we want. We're making choices based on what we think we're supposed to want. Over time, This loss of agency leads to learned helplessness and depression. People might describe feeling empty, like their life isn't really theirs, like they're just going through the motions. This emptiness is often a sign that they've become disconnected from their authentic self. There are also physical health consequences to inauthenticity and emotional suppression. Research in psychoneuroimmunology has shown that emotional suppression can weaken immune function. When we're chronically suppressing our emotions and inauthentically presenting ourselves, our bodies remain in a state of stress. The stress hormone cortisol remains elevated, which over time can contribute to inflammation, cardiovascular disease, weakened immunity, and various other health problems. People who suppress their emotions have been found to have higher rates of heart disease, higher blood pressure, and more frequent infections than people who allow themselves to feel and express their emotions. Relationship problems are another significant cost. While we might think that suppressing our authentic self would help us maintain relationships, that if we just hide the parts we think are unacceptable, people will like us more, the opposite often happens. Relationships built on an inauthentic version of ourselves are inherently unstable. The other person isn't in relationship with the real us. They're in relationship with our performance. When we can't be authentic in a relationship, we also can't be truly vulnerable. And without vulnerability, there can't be genuine intimacy. So we end up with relationships that look good on the surface, but feel hollow underneath. We feel lonely even when we're surrounded by people, because no one really knows us. There's also a cost to our sense of identity. When we spend years or decades suppressing certain aspects of ourselves, we can lose touch with who we are. We might reach a point in our lives, sometimes triggered by a major life event, where we ask ourselves, who am I really? And realize we don't know the answer. This identity confusion can be destabilizing, but it's also an opportunity. It's a sign that we're ready to reconnect with our authentic self. Grief is another cost that's often overlooked. People who realize they've spent years or decades suppressing their authentic self often experience a profound grief. Grief for the life they might have lived if they'd felt safe being themselves. Grief for the relationships that might have been deeper. Grief for the dreams they abandoned to fit in. Grief for the parts of themselves they had to hide. This grief is valid and important to feel, because feeling it is part of the process of moving forward authentically. There's also what might be called authenticity fatigue, the paradox that the effort to appear authentic while actually being inauthentic is exhausting. We have to carefully monitor what we're saying, how we're behaving, what's visible, and what needs to be hidden. We have to maintain consistency across different audiences, making sure our performance is believable. This requires constant attention and energy. People often don't realize how much of their energy is being consumed by maintaining their false self until they start to relax that maintenance. Then they suddenly have so much more energy available for things that matter to them. Understanding why we suppress ourselves is the first step toward changing that pattern. As long as self-suppression feels like our fault, like a character flaw or a sign of weakness, we'll likely respond to it with more shame and more suppression. But when we understand it as a survival mechanism, a learned pattern, a response to the environment we grew up in, and the social forces we're still embedded in, we can respond with compassion. The path toward authenticity is not about becoming a different person or suddenly being completely yourself in all contexts. It's about gradually expanding the spaces where it feels safe to be more authentic. It might start with one trusted person, a therapist, a close friend, or a partner, who we allow to see more of our real self. As we take the risk of being seen and discover that we're not rejected, our nervous system learns that authenticity is not as dangerous as we thought. We have corrective experiences that challenge our core belief that our true self is unacceptable. Therapy can be invaluable in this process. A good therapist provides a space where you can be completely authentic without fear of judgment. The therapist's role is to listen without judgment, to validate your experiences, and to help you understand the patterns that developed. Over time, the experience of being fully seen and accepted by the therapist can be reparative. It can help counter the experiences that taught you that your authentic self is unacceptable. Many people describe therapy as the first time they felt truly safe to be themselves. Reconnecting with your authentic desires and values is another important part of the process. When we've been suppressing ourselves for a long time, we often lose touch with what we actually want. We might not know our genuine preferences, values, or dreams anymore. Getting these back requires taking time to get curious about ourselves. What did you love as a child before you learned to suppress it? What do you find yourself drawn to when you're not thinking about what you're supposed to do? What would you do if no one would judge you? What do you believe in, even if your family or community doesn't? What brings you genuine joy versus what you do because you think you should? These questions can help reconnect you with your authentic self. Small acts of authenticity can also be powerful. You don't have to suddenly tell everyone everything you've been hiding. Start small. Share an opinion you've been keeping to yourself. Wear something that makes you happy, even if you think it's not fashionable. Laugh at something that genuinely makes you laugh, instead of the laugh that's expected. Say no to something you don't actually want to do. These small acts of authenticity help your nervous system learn that it's safe to be seen, and they build a sense of agency and self-trust. Finding people and communities that accept you for who you are is crucial. We're social creatures, and we need to belong. The healing comes not from being alone, but from being with people who accept our authentic selves. This might mean finding new communities if your current ones don't accept you. It might mean deepening relationships with people who do accept you. It might mean looking for online communities, groups, or spaces where people like you are accepted and celebrated. As we begin to experience acceptance for who we really are, our sense of safety around authenticity increases. It's also important to grieve what needs to be grieved. The loss of the approval of people who require you to be inauthentic. The loss of the identity you constructed to please others. The loss of the relationships that were based on a false version of you. This grieving process is necessary because trying to skip over grief and jump straight to authenticity often doesn't work. We need to acknowledge what we're losing in order to move toward what we're gaining. Setting boundaries is another essential skill for moving toward authenticity. When we're used to suppressing ourselves to please others, setting boundaries can feel rude, selfish, or wrong. But boundaries are actually expressions of authenticity. They're a way of saying, this is what I want, this is what I'm willing to do, this is where I end and you begin. As we practice setting small boundaries and discover that most people respect them, and that those who don't respect them weren't safe for us anyway, our confidence in our right to be authentic grows. The fear of being ourselves is real, and it's rooted in legitimate causes. We didn't develop these patterns because we were broken or flawed. We developed them because we were resilient. Self-suppression was adaptive at one point. It kept us safe. It helped us survive situations that would have been dangerous if we'd been fully authentic. We should be grateful to the parts of ourselves that learned to suppress and perform, because those survival mechanisms protected us. But at some point, these protective mechanisms stop protecting us and start imprisoning us. They protect us from rejection, but also from genuine connection. They protect us from judgment, but also from being truly seen. They protect us from potential hurt, but also from authentic joy and love. At that point, the question becomes, are we willing to take the risk of being authentic, even though authenticity carries the risk of rejection, judgment, or hurt? The answer to this question is different for everyone, and it changes depending on our circumstances. For someone still living in an abusive or dangerous environment, maintaining suppression might still be necessary for safety. For someone beginning to venture into safer spaces, gradually expanding authenticity might be the next step. For someone who has spent years in therapy and has built a support system, more radical authenticity might be possible. There's no one right way to move toward authenticity. There's only the pace that feels manageable for your particular nervous system and circumstances. What's important to recognize is that this journey is possible. You don't have to spend your whole life behind a mask. You don't have to live as a stranger to yourself. The patterns that taught you to suppress yourself can be unlearned. Your nervous system, which learned that authenticity is dangerous, can learn that it's safe. Your core beliefs about yourself being fundamentally flawed can be challenged and changed. It takes time, often considerable time. It takes support, usually professional support. It takes courage to risk being seen after years of hiding. But it's possible. Throughout this exploration of why people are afraid to be themselves, we've looked at the individual psychology, the fear of judgment, the shame, the trauma, and the social systems that reinforce self-suppression. We've looked at how these patterns develop in childhood and how they persist through our adult lives. We've looked at the costs of inauthenticity and the benefits of moving toward authenticity. But perhaps most importantly, we've looked at the understanding that this isn't about blame or weakness. It's about survival, adaptation, and resilience. You are not broken because you suppress yourself. You are not defective because you struggle to be authentic. You are not wrong for having learned to hide. What happened to you? Whether it was explicit abuse or subtle conditional love, whether it was trauma or just growing up in an environment where vulnerability wasn't safe, shaped you. And that's understandable. What matters now is whether you want to remain shaped by those past experiences or whether you want to reclaim the freedom to shape yourself going forward. The path toward authenticity is not about perfection. It's It's not about becoming a person who's always authentic in every situation with every person. That's not realistic or even desirable. The goal is more nuanced. It's about having options. It's about being able to choose when to be open and when to be more guarded, when to express yourself and when to stay silent, when to take up space and when to make room for others. It's about agency. It's about freedom. It's about coming back to yourself. As you reflect on what you've learned in this exploration, consider where you might be suppressing yourself, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Where do you find yourself performing rather than being? Where are you hiding parts of yourself that might be valuable to share? Where are you staying silent when you'd like to speak? Where are you saying yes when you want to say no? These aren't things you need to change immediately. They're just things to notice. And as you notice them, you might begin to gently, gradually, at your own pace, experiment with being a little bit more yourself. The people in your life who are meant to stay will appreciate your authenticity more than they appreciate your performance. They might even be relieved to finally know the real you. And the people who can't accept your authentic self, they were never going to be safe for you anyway. That's not your loss. That's clarity. And clarity is the foundation upon which real connection, real love, and real life can be built. Your authentic self isn't too much. It's not too sensitive, too ambitious, too different, too weird, or too anything. Your authentic self is exactly what the world needs from you. Not a performance, not a mask, not the version you think you're supposed to be. Just you. Real, vulnerable, imperfect, and absolutely worth